technology space? Like, for example, do you see yourself working in a business enabling capacity, or do you see yourself more in like the big screens in the SOC and watching that? And I think that's something that early on in my career, I just assumed all security people sit there and watch screens and look for creepy things. But that's not really how mine went. And so I offer my security career and the paths I've taken, some of the junctions that I've come to help others see maybe, I guess they call them untraditional things, because sometimes I do feel like I'm an outsider or a weirdo in what I've put together. But at the same time, I've had some incredible opportunities and, as they say, able to be in a seat at a table that I never would have imagined. I've also been able to get some of my messages about security concerns, threats, events, topics, even purchases in front of executives, because I knew the business. I could calculate the payroll impact. And so working at Safeway, for example, you're probably really familiar with payroll. Converting those kind of things over to security jargons and initiatives has been super helpful in my career. So mine's a little unconventional and different than probably what now if I was to start. And I think we need both. We need kind of the old school security careers and the new ones, because I will sit at a table with somebody who's got their master's degree and have their college degrees in cybersecurity. And it's I always think of that yin yang thing. It's like we couldn't exist without each other. My questions, their answers, and vice versa. So I titled it Making Your Own Path. And with that, if we can move to the second slide. And for introductions, I'll expand a little bit more on mine. I have to say, if I'm the receiver of a presentation, I sometimes get a little distracted with somebody's background. But I think in this case, I want to share it so you can see a different path than one that didn't go to cybersecurity college. My degree is actually in environmental policy and assessment from Western. I wanted to hug and save all the trees. I still do. But I needed a job to put me through college, and I ended up in retail. And one thing led to another, to be at Costco. And because I had managed the stores, I understood point of sale systems. So they stuck me over there and how to make registers work and make scheduling systems work. But it was really an ownership of those systems. The last one I did in terms of a system was all the gas stations that Costco has in North America, and started up the Taiwan one. I didn't know anything more about gas stations than pumping gas myself. Now I can tell you what's under the concrete and what's in the wiring cabinet and then what's getting sent across the internet. But all of those things, I guess I would say, definitely approach it maybe like Theodore Roosevelt did and say yes, and then figure out how. That's been my approach. Has it been uncomfortable? Have my toes been on the edge? Have I been scared, had imposter syndrome, all those things? Yes, I have. And I still have them to this day. But I think it's also made me better at this career. I hear some noise. Did we have a question? No? Okay. So currently today, I am an information security compliance engineer with the international website platform that serves about 10 different countries right now. Ironically, not the US and Canada, but our platform centralized stuff. It's been one of the neatest experiences. It's been different than a traditional security in the sense that I'm this partner, more like a consultant and advisor to my team, and a very strong agile team. And that's really changed the paradigm on how I deliver and communicate with this team. It's JIRA tickets. It's not big reports. It's quick answers in chat. That's all I get. And it's been a change. And it was, hey, I'm used to typing all this up. I mean, I don't have to. That's great. But at the same time, like, did you really understand what I'm trying to say to you? So be open to changes as those come. So I broke this into 4 sections to share with you, to open some doors, maybe send some pathways out there that you can look as you start your career, as you maybe work on projects in school. Some things that I have found super valuable. If I was to do it again, I would include them again. One, I was going to illustrate how my security career started, because I think it's important to know the past and understand those that we sit at the tables with. And that'll include some security events and regulatory developments. PCI actually did not exist when I started. And then constructing your careers and skill sets. I heard several of you mention you had past careers, not just past jobs, and those are valuable and need to not be forgotten and be applied to your next adventure. Some networking and public-private partnerships that I have found to be not only good for my career in developing these, but also have been some free training and experiences that I could not have imagined that I'd have the opportunity to have. And a third slide. Perfect. So then and now. So security in the early 2000s. I think my story is easiest to say. I was working on point of sale systems for the warehouses and the gas stations. And you guys have probably looked back in the history books now about some of the credit card breaches of huge retailers that was happening in restaurants. And there was just boom, boom, boom. There was an FBI informant that was at the root of all of these. That people were doing things you wouldn't even conceive doing now in these systems, and controls, encryption systems that today exist, and we just assume that we're all using them. Those weren't there. And so, yes, was it a sitting there waiting to happen kind of thing? Probably. But when they came and they happened, basically everyone's scared and they're looking at, well, who knows how to run these systems? So you had security teams that were like, well, I know how a register works. Okay, come over here. You're a security person now. I was like, wait a minute. And it was fun for me. They pulled telecommunications people in because we still had old school phones. The teams I was with, we were punching down the Cat5 cables, like we'd cut them and make them ourselves and put them in there. When fiber optic didn't work, people actually signed flashlights down it to see and had the mirror at the other end. It was pretty scrappy and basically trying to put things together. You had financial scandals that came. You remember the Enron thing where the integrity of a company's records were brought into question, and there was 2 books, but these weren't paper books anymore. These were computer books, and there was not really good understanding from the business side what the tech side could do. And so it was something that ended up happening before we had a lot of controls and practices in place. Healthcare records, they were in dumpsters. Things that we just didn't conceive our healthcare was on, your little vials, the labels, the misprinted labels. There was databases. Well, let's make it easy to get to. Healthcare clinicians aren't usually technical trained people, let alone recognize those things can happen out there. And so HIPAA, developed from that. Personal identifiable information. Not only did the elements of PII become in computer systems and vulnerable to people who were not supposed to have them, but you also recognize the social media changes that have happened, and our perceptions of privacy have changed as well. And so as a result of that, we work in this world of regulatory development. We have the PCI DSS, we have SOX, we have HIPAA. Myself, I work a lot with GDPR. There's a lot of consistencies with protecting the information. So we kind of get lucky. And that's where data classifications come in. And, if I'm talking to this audience, it's restricted, confidential, internal, and public. If I'm talking to a non-technical, it's the creepy data that we don't want anyone else to see. So sometimes that's the company's information that, they'll say, well, that's not important. That's not PCI. That's not HIPAA. Well, do you want our competitor to see it? Do you want the world to see it? No, and that is heck no. So there's other areas that aren't falling underneath regulatory development. But if I play a love-hate relationship with it, it has given me tools and it has some consistency to it. And so it has helped a lot to rein things in and to have verbiage to deliver and move through. The other thing that it developed out of there were IT compliance groups, which are, I still see, different than information security. You also started working with legal like you never did before. I remember when the large credit card breaches were happening, all of a sudden I'm in the lawyer's office and they're asking me all these detailed questions about the point of sale system. I'm like, nobody cared about this, let alone legal before. And you're advising them. Did I, what a legal person wants to hear? No. They were talking sometimes about insurance companies, and things that, you don't really pick up in your line of IT work. Risk was another area that I had to go study a lot more on, because you can't fix everything. You've heard probably a long time, there's no silver bullet. And some of this, we just have to accept the risk. We can fortify things, we can put controls in place, but we do go to bed at night knowing that, we did the best we can, and the target's going to move tomorrow. So it's it definitely, in a world of zeros and ones and bits and bytes where the switch is on and switch is off, risk is not like that. And it's a super softy, squishy thing sometimes. And everyone's perception is different than the other person's. And it can be a difficult one to articulate. But there are formulas out there if you go for formal training about it. And you can start to have the vocabulary and the dialogue, or learn to ask the questions of the person to find their risk appetite. And that's another thing that just wasn't a discussion an IT person was having before. And slide number 4. And before I start 4, are there any questions? Okay. So a DIY, I think that was my best way of explaining how I put things together. And everybody's going to be different on what they're personally interested in, their experiences, availability, sometimes whether that's financial or if that's locale. We definitely, I guess, a COVID karma thing, we can get to a lot of online tools that we didn't have before. But some of the areas that I found the first thing I did was I went and got my CISSP. And I didn't know what I was doing, but luckily I'm a good studier and a good tester. Got through the CISSP. And then probably, I would guess, 1.5 years, 2 years after that, I went, and this was an unconventional turn, and I actually had to appeal a no that I got from management to a level higher, was to get the Certified Protection Professional, which is a board level certification from ASIS, a group that traditionally IT security people don't really look to. It is a growing merge between them and ISC2 squared, but they're still distinct. And the ASIS team, it came from more of a law enforcement, loss prevention background, physical security. Not so much anymore. It's frankly one of the best conferences that I would go to would be the ASIS one, as far as professional networking, moving the conceptual security business forward, not necessarily just the security IT, but the security business forward. So I came back just one gung ho, like, hey, we can do this, it's going to work. But I also came back with business concepts that security could utilize. So I definitely would recommend looking at certifications like that. But frankly, I stopped at the 2. I felt it kind of satisfied both camps. They're costly to maintain. Luckily, Costco pays, for my annual renewals and things. But if you start getting a lot of letters after it, I think at some point it may start losing meaning to people, and not everyone knows what they mean anyways. But there are some recognizable ones. And then just look in terms of investment. And just because you have those doesn't mean, that, what do I want to say, that it's going to be something you're proficient in. And so make sure it's something that you really want to be connected with. I did get one that I actually dropped. I purposely retired because I was like, it's not serving me, and I didn't want to continue to pay for it. Some other things I did, I'm not a programmer. I'm not a coder. One of the best advices I had when I started the security career was you can be a generalist, or you can get specific about something. And as far as survivability in terms of my career, a generalist was the best choice for me. And so I kind of illustrated as I skim the top. I know enough that I can write a statement of work with a partner, and I can recognize who I need to hire and surround with me. I can read the reports that come out. I can consult on things. But if we're going to go dive super deep into something, that's when I get the subject matter experts. And so I've taken programming and coding, but, like a lot of things, if you don't come back and you don't sit there and do it, but, they were talking about a pseudo command today. I understood what they were talking about. Those kind of things, if you aren't inclined to go super tech. Forensics, I've taken Black Bag, so it was Mac related, and took guidance as well. And it was great for a lot of reasons. I understood a little bit more about how it all works, if you will. I sat in rooms where half of it was law enforcement, and it was nice to contrast. They work within search warrants. I don't necessarily in private, but as an emerging department in forensics, it was good guidance, and I took from them, like, okay, if somebody's going to tell me to do forensics or an investigation on a fellow employee, I want a corporate search warrant. I want specifics. What do you want? Because when I started doing my word searches, it was like, oh, holy heck, of the things that would come back in my little mock forensic things. I was like, we need to control this, because one, I'm paid for my time and we need to be efficient. But secondarily, there's things that even a security person doesn't need or want to see. So there are some side benefits of mixing in with some other careers. I took an ethical hacking class. I captured only one flag, but there were four. But I was like, woohoo, one. It covers certifications. Some indirect and supportive skills that I've taken, and some of these I've tripped over and fallen into. Some of them were deliberate. For those with professional career past paths, don't leave those behind. And when you need to rebrand those experiences, when you're looking at a next employer, think about the aptitude. You were doing something super well, and then you decided to do something else. There's no reason you're not going to do that super well. It's those skills to learn, to adjust, to adapt, to see things, to take on new information and apply it. Definitely emphasize those things. It was something that, yes, I merchandised, stores. I had to keep control of costs and waste and shrink. Can you correlate those things to traditionally a department that just spends money, to how maybe I can conserve the money spent, but also how could I maybe prevent money being lost? Learn business concepts. I think one of the best ones, I remember, I don't forget this one, I learned the net book value concept. And so if I'm saying, hey, you need to replace that server or that big machine, it's out of date, it's end of life, I can't put updates on there. And then they say, well, that has a net book value of $500,000 still in there. I can't just scrap it. If you already know those things and you go in there and say, hey, I pulled up the financials on this, we've got this much left to do on it, and here's my roadmap and my plan and my compensating controls in the meantime, you're going to get a lot farther with the business if you're talking their talk. I put in a physical control check in the warehouses for Costco, for example. And when I proposed it to the operators, I brought in the payroll calculations. I think they looked at me like, you what? I was like, hey, I was a retail manager. I know what your questions are going to be. I'm asking you to do this to protect our data and our systems and our members, but I realize it has a cost, and I'm not going to ignore that. So it gives you some street cred when you get in those discussions and those presentations. Leadership skills. This one, I have a real life example. I have chosen not to take a management track where I work, and instead just keep finding things to keep me happy and interested and challenged. At the engineer level, I still feel like I have a lot of room to move laterally, explore different subjects. People aren't reporting to me. It's my fun place, to be honest. But I need leadership skills because there's still areas that I have to lead a group or a concept. So one of the things that I did was I joined a nonprofit board of directors, where I was there for about 11 years with the FBI's Seattle Citizens Academy alumni. And yeah, I said, yeah, sure, I'll do that. It took me down some roads I wouldn't have expected, where you're managing a budget, you're having, Robert's rules, you have board disputes, and these are adults, they aren't children, and you go through some experiences. We have a MOU with the FBI, and so when you are using the FBI's letters in there at their discretion, you also have a lot of rules to follow, and working with them. So that was a great experience. Not to mention, I met 3 of the FBI directors. So as far as learning to be learning to be confident in yourself in front of people, that was a good experience as well. Intelligence analyst training is kind of where I've focused lately. That is super cool. There's intelligence analysts in the law enforcement, and you'll hear a lot with terrorism related areas or threats against the country and stuff. But it does go over to our threat analysis that we're doing. And I was sitting through one last week and they were talking about follow the money for the crime. I was like, well, that's funny because I just have to follow the money to get grounds for my security thing. The same concept. Like, where would we lose money? Do we make money? But bringing the information together, if you're familiar with any of it, there's some certain ways that intelligence analysts collect and process information where they have hypotheses and they go and they prove or disprove them. They have mind mapping exercises, presentations of financials. They were great things to come back and apply. And you just got to, shift the lens a little bit. But it was a nice group to work with and good networking. I have taken some interviewing and interrogation and micro expression classes. That sounds kind of weird maybe, but it's come in super handy when you're doing compliance work. And it's not to put your colleagues and your coworkers on the hot seat or make them feel uncomfortable and slam the book down or anything like that. But you learn how to ask questions to draw the information out that you need and put people at ease. And so if you're doing this for the company and to protect the company, in my case, we're publicly traded and we owe to our shareholders, I need my people to feel comfortable to tell me what is going on, right or wrong, but what it is. And that gave me some good training. Learn contracts. I have to read a contract probably, I'd say every other month, and they'll ask me questions about security elements within it. I don't care for it, but they have to start learning it. Statement of work. I'm currently right now going through a statement of work and making there's money at the bottom. There's a bottom line thing in there. So I have to justify all these components within this statement of work and how it's beneficial to both the company and our work and the integrity of our systems, but also a compliance element. It went up a few $1,000s. I have to go back and ask because I know I'm going to be asked, well, why did it cost you that much more than last time? So being able to sift through those, it's not necessarily an IT work, but making sure that the business documents are good before you go before somebody and ask them for a lot of money. Report writing, and this I'd say know your audience, because your reports, I remember a colleague who came up to me and it was more of a mentor relationship, and she was super excited about this 40-page report that she had put together and all the information inside of it. And I was struck on how the focus was on, look how this big report, it's 40 pages and it's got this. I'm like, it really was hard to tell her. I said, nobody's going to read it. I said, they're going to take the executive summary, which I hope you have, and that's it. And so and I had another gentleman on my team that had done the same thing, and it was good stuff. I mean, it is like for a colleague, one-to-one, yeah, we'd love it. But I explained it as far as if you've been hired, they're compensating you for that. They know your knowledge from your resume and your interviews. Trust that they know what you're doing. Give them the executive report, your conclusions, your findings, whatever they are. Have the other information ready if they do ask. But I've found for the most part, they hired you because you know what you're doing. So just tell them what's what. And if they need more information, it'll be at the ready. And even that, they'll learn that you have it ready and you were prepared. But I learned not to have my feelings hurt if they didn't look at all my research. I was proud of it, but I had to let it go. Speaking in front of people, my first experience in the security field was Secure World, and I think that was 2008. I was nervous as heck, but I'm glad I did it, and I've actually stayed involved with the Secure World conference team on their advisory board since then, both here and in California. A great network of people. But that did lead to probably my most nerve-wracking one was presenting in a SIOC at ODNI back in DC. That was that was quite a crowd. But I had built up the confidence, gained the chance to speak in front of smaller and different audiences. And then when I'm at this large one and the status symbols behind all those acronyms kind of intimidating, I felt comfortable doing it. And sometimes I'll get up and I'll just say, hey, you guys all have me really nervous. I'm going to give it my best shot. And usually I can talk myself down. My heart rate goes down a few notches when I just admit it in front of people. Loss prevention. So I have the benefit, and it was Brandy, I think, was at Safeway. The loss prevention background actually is, I found really good to have. I have it from retail as well, and it keeps me in check. People have been stealing stuff from retailers since retailers started selling things, and it's all to our best efforts, our cameras, our security checks, locks and keys and everything. It hasn't stopped it. And that was kind of when I realized that, working with the loss prevention team, we're always just trying to get better, move the needle forward, and not give this perception that, nope, we're going to stop it. Because when it's defeating to us, because it's just not going to happen. And having a more realistic approach, but you also don't want to deliver false promises to people, and then your credibility goes down. And so the loss prevention team, again, the other area of them was asset protection. So loss prevention is looking at the merchandise, they're looking at the building. They put lighting out in the parking lot so you can see for safety. Those kind of concepts you can bring over into information security. So you may have a company that you work for that they get it. Loss prevention, physical security. Look for parallels in loss prevention over cameras, monitoring your logs in the systems, detection, right? You have alarm systems out there. Well, I need alarm systems too. Assets are assets, but sometimes you have to illustrate it. Any questions about that? Okay, we have one more slide to go. And the last one is Q&A after that, and my contact information. So this one is outside the office. So what do I do? The local security conferences are super important. I remember my first one. The industry has changed a lot, but I will never forget. It's indelible in my mind. I was at RSA. Costco had sent me down there. Hey, this is the best thing. Go for it. Okay. And I get down there, and I remember going into the ladies' room, and there was nobody in there. If anyone's been to RSA in the Moscone Center, it's like it's stadium seating for bathrooms, and there was nobody else in there. I honestly thought I was in the wrong one. It was, the diversity of all levels and all types of diversity has changed in this community so much. What I was surrounded by 2 or 3 people in my group, gosh, that's over 10 years ago. I mean, the diversity is just enormous, and I welcome it. And so getting out there and getting in these security conferences and meeting people is super helpful. Yes, I'm tired at the end of the day, my feet just killing, but do show up for those social networking things afterwards, best you can. And if you're not bringing business cards, bring some way to quickly give your information to people. So it's don't lose those opportunities, because I've found those to be really relevant, really important, and we end up relying on each other for things later on. National and international organizations. So the local ones like Secure World, that's a small group, and it was a nice one for me to get comfortable in. Then you've got national ones and international ones with RSA and the ASIS one. And you can start to see ASIS, for example, the beginning of all theirs is a parade of all the flags of the nations that are there. I don't know who's not there. It is just, it's super cool. And it's just energizing to see that the security agendas and the things we're trying to do, that we do have commonality in that across the whole globe. And that one is one of my favorite ones to go to. Leadership. Participate in organizations, like I mentioned, the FBI Citizens Academy. It could be the ASPCA. I mean, it doesn't necessarily need to be even related to security, but getting a chance to organize something outside of work. Another example that I do outside of work is I do Ironman triathlons. And so working within teams, putting together organized runs and events for each other, all those things give you those little micro doses of training and thinking through and brain exercise, if you will, and leverage those life experiences. Don't let those go just because they didn't have security labels at the time. Definitely bring those in. Some public-private partnerships. So this is, I best describe this, I think, is if we think about the old telephone companies, and the telephone companies were generally government run, same with airlines, things like that, way back. And they've been privatized. If you take the fuel systems, for example, the fuel lines are mostly in private hands, yet the nation relies on getting gas. So you have this situation where I've got top secret clearance people, and then I've got, well, I have intellectual property, and I have PCI, and I have health data. We don't really have the same vocabulary when it comes to what we don't share and what we need to share and how we share it. I was having a conference call with someone at the Bureau earlier this week, and he couldn't use his camera because he's in the office. Federal guys can't use anything but Microsoft Teams for the most part either. So there's some stumbling blocks, but there is a large group of people trying to make it work. We all have something invested in here, stakeholders in the infrastructure for the country. But there's other things besides that. So if you're not familiar, and I sounded them all out because I didn't know the audience on here. So excuse me if they look long and it appears weird to write it all out. But DHS and the CISA organization, get on that website. It is so much stuff and so much free information and training. I work with one of the, well, actually like 3 different CISA partners in the area locally here. And it's been phenomenal. It's a great relationship. But the website itself has so much information about threats and vulnerability publications, but also training that's free. You just create your own account and you go in there and get it. So don't overlook that. DHS also has, and I've done 3 years of this, the analyst exchange program, and that was phenomenal. So this is how I got the opportunity at ODNI. Again, I said, oh yeah, sure, I'll sign up for that, and I didn't know. But I found myself back in Virginia at a table that was half private sector and half public sector people. So I had FBI, NSA, Border Patrol, and then I had competitors, like my size competitors sitting across the table. And I remember thinking, oh no, how's this going to work? Because we like are, and but it was about the pharmaceutical supply chain. And we worked on a white paper and put together a bunch of research, which ended up being about the hurricanes that hit Puerto Rico and the impact on 10% of the medical supplies to the United States. And we all collaborated on this. We gave the presentation on it. It got rave reviews. And then I actually, with the lady from the other company, would go around this area and give presentations. Camp Murray, we did a law enforcement group, emergency response for Washington. So it was more practice for me, public speaking, but I got to learn how intelligence analysts for the FBI write up reports, how they look at information. And all of those are skills I've brought back to my own work, not to mention I've had these great connections. Office of Private Sector, if you're not familiar with that, that was created, as I recall, when Comey was the director. And that is the FBI's dedication to working with the private sector. Underneath that, you'll find InfraGard, which is a partnership with the Bureau. And that's, again, another public-private partnership where I have a bio in there. And if something goes weird, my bio seems to, I'd know stuff, they might contact me. When the pandemic started, the local group of InfraGard actually met for probably 6 to 8 weeks to try to get our feet underneath us around here. How could we share each other's resources and knowledge? They also, if you're in a larger company and the company chooses to pay for it, there's a section of the private sector called DSAC, and I never remember how to sound it out, but that's another resource underneath there. And lastly, on here, and the local chapter is active, the Secret Service's Cyber Fraud Task Force. And that's another one that has been this collaboration of people from banks. The AUSA comes to the meeting sometimes. We have a Secret Service agent. They'll present a case and work through it. And so that's another one where I've learned more about, the Fin 7 thing when that went out. We got a brief on that. It's obviously not, secret squirrel, but it's what they can share with us. But you get access to an agent. So if you know a special agent at the Seattle field office, you work in a company here and something goes bump in the night, you've made that rapport, you've made that relationship. And so you're not just this anonymous caller calling in or have reservations. You always go grab your legal representation before you call them. But I know somebody, I can ask them. I've called up Secret Service asking them for advice about something. So making those relationships one-on-one with a first last name person was super valuable through all those experiences. And with that, I'll move to questions. And the last one has my email on there as well. I'm sorry about the background noise. My dogs apparently are really thirsty.
It looks like the first question we have from the chat from Tyler is, if I wanted to go into the field of intelligence analysis, where should I begin if I have no experience and I'm only 1 year into the master's program?
Oh, good question. So the two classes I've taken that I've found through these networks of things, one was with the Department of Justice, and I don't have it close to me, but I'll get you the information of the class I just took that runs by a non-law enforcement. I don't think they're law enforcement, but they work real close with them. But I would get those classes and those training, those concepts, because there's their little process that all of them talk the same language in. And you can get that in a week and get this intro to certification, which I guess is what a lot of the law enforcement people needed this cert to test for the job in their department. So I can get you that information afterwards if that works to share with the group.
Thank you so much. That will really help. And I also just tried connecting with you on LinkedIn. So
yeah. And there's another one I'll put in there. I'm not super familiar with it. It's one I'm just put my toe in. The Diamond Project, I think it is. So I'll add that too, but I haven't used it yet.
If you had questions, you're welcome to raise hand or just put your mic on or use the chat if your mic isn't working also. In the meantime, I definitely have a question for you, Jenifer.
Yeah.
Well, I've got a couple, but I'll just do one for now. Kind of interested about the corporate search warrants. What are some like tips and ways that you formulated those?
One more time.
For the corporate search warrants, how did you formulate them, or how did you come up with kind of the basic?
Yeah. So these dogs always pick the least opportune time to have a war. So from the corporate search warrant standpoint, so when we were going in through the guidance one, particularly is where I started this, you would say, well, who are you searching on? So I'm searching on this person, first, last name. What's the scope of it? Is it the computer? Is it their internet activity? Where are the boundaries of this search? Give it scope and give it specific scope. Who needs to give permission? Usually it's HR that says whether or not you can investigate an employee. Sometimes legal will come in there. So on the thing, I had sign-offs. So if I had rando manager come up to me and say, I think my employee's doing something wrong, great, you need to go get these approvals. I'm not pulling emails. I'm not pulling any, log activity or anything until you get these appropriate approvals for me to go and do that research under these specific directions. If it gets to keywords, you write down the keywords you want me to search, and I'm not searching any more than those keywords, just based on I might come back. I might say, I'll just make up something like if it was marijuana, guns, or something like that. Okay, I'll search marijuana and guns. And then I see cocaine accidentally in the same email. I can come back and say, hey, I need to give you an update on this. This is what I found searching with these two words. These other words seem to be associated with it. Would you like to expand this? But having that continuous touch base with HR, personnel, whatever they call themselves, and having those officer approvals on things. For me, a manager isn't even good enough. It requires a higher level of approval to investigate in a corporate environment, to investigate a person. And the ethics involved in it, I think, is something we have to self-govern sometimes.
That definitely makes sense. In the chat, we have another question from Lakshmi. If I have a master's in cyber, is it valuable to get the CISSP or other certifications?
That's a hard one. I think I'm avoiding the word that we all dread that starts with D. Certain employers, we hear do scans on the resumes, and I'd hate to see a good candidate get scanned out because it didn't pick up those letters. I don't know if they look for masters in cybersecurity as much as they look for those acronyms of certifications. And so it probably varies on the employer or the area that you're trying to get the job. You know, for me, I found certifications. I've had some of the best engineers that I've worked with have nothing in security or even a master's or anything in there. It's been just on the job and smart person. So, you know, I've learned from my interviewing. Another weird hop I had in my career was I stepped out of security for about 4 years, and I learned to manage our warehouses down in California and environmental regulations and things. And so I did. I interviewed candidates, and you know, you learn right there on the spot that regardless of this resume and the opportunities that came their way, they can have aptitude and, you know, abilities to do so much more. You just got to bring it out of them. So the time I took it, I mean, you're talking 2007. I think it was probably even a different book and different test. It felt very, passing the test did not make me feel like I was a security superhero. So that's where it's like certifications are great. It says you went through this body of knowledge and you were able to test on it successfully. But frankly, I think a master's in cybersecurity, I would, on a surface level, say that you had a more in-depth exposure to the subject matter and somebody interacting and making you apply it than the certification. But that's just kind of the industry. I hope that's a helpful answer. It's really going to matter, I think, where you're trying to apply and what field and what line of work if they notice it.
Thank you. That really helped.
You're welcome.
Just checking.
Oh yeah, while you're looking, I could add the CPP one that I got. In contrast, if I was to say the CISP was an inch deep, mile wide, the other one was 2 miles wide and 2 inches deep. And their questions on that test, they were, I'd say, borderline and subjective. You chose the best answer. There wasn't, you know, the obvious answer. I felt more exhausted from taking that CPP one from an asset protection standpoint in the questions. And in that case, I mean, it just covered so much, from physical lighting to risk assessments to drug activities, things, signs, indicators, things like that. But I felt I walked away with something more solid. If I was to say closer to getting a master's degree, I felt that CPP experience was closer to actually more of a college education than I felt I got from the CISP myself. One that I would, if you were going to get into IT compliance, that one I think you would need to look at those certifications, because internal audit teams, they're different. They're not like IT teams. And internal auditors, auditing firms, they're going to look to see that you have some structured audit training so the products that you produce are consistent with the industry. That might be an area that you would want to invest in it specifically. Another area that I know would be like if you were going to get into being a QSA or an ISA in the payment card industries, those are certifications that you'd have to study and get in order to do those jobs. You couldn't do them otherwise.
Just checking through the chat. I don't see any hands up, but feel free to raise hands. Oh, it looks like, okay, now we have some hands. We have Will, and then, oh, just Will so far.
Okay. Hi, Will.
Hello. So working in the industry as you have, I know most people don't think of things like cybersecurity when they think of Costco. When you,
It's okay. If they don't know about you, maybe that's good.
No. But I think it's important that people, you know, appreciate that this is something for every business out there. And I was curious because we've looked at a lot of industry, provided talks and stuff like that for our club and stuff like that, and we've covered incidents and things like that. Are there any other companies that most people wouldn't gravitate towards or think of right away that actually have robust cybersecurity programs that you have like friends within the industry or would recommend looking into for a career?
I'd have to think about that one and go through and I could get back to you guys on an answer on that. Yeah, I see what you're saying, and maybe a way to look at it is if you were to take I think they're saying there's 17 infrastructures because they added voting, but I think still we say 16 critical infrastructure out there. If you're familiar with that, Homeland Security looks at that. So it'd be like energy, water treatment, I'm trying to think of all of them off the top of my head. There's gas, petroleum. These are all things that existed before cyber came along. And that's maybe a lens I'd look through. I can look through to see if other companies come to mind in my LinkedIn database while I'm not staring at the camera. But I would look maybe at the 16 infrastructures because those existed before computers were working. All their SCADA systems, your industrial control systems. That's been one of the areas that kind of like Costco, if you will. As a perfect example, I had a new security engineer a few years back. He came in and we were changing some servers, like throw out the new, put in the new, throw out the old, put in the new. And he goes, "Oh, that's a forklift move." I looked at him like, "What the heck are you talking about? We don't need forklifts to move the servers around." And that was his terminology of saying, take out the old, put the new in. It's like, you work for a company that the forklifts are more important than the servers. I thought you literally meant move a pallet, and because that's how we work. So yes, in Costco, the IT was, a necessity, but it certainly wasn't what we led with. We're a merchandise company. We're a supply chain and grocery. And so I would look at companies that on the outside, yeah, you wouldn't think of them having that. And I think that you'd be surprised. Some have really good ones inside. And then some they're struggling. It's still something that maybe they have a resentment for, not the people, but the money and the concepts and the unknown area. And so it could be, a budding industry area too for new students to go into.
Okay. Thank you very much. I think we'd all love to hear back on the good companies that you recommend. At the very least, it might turn into another great talk for us, just like the one that you've just given.
Yeah.
And I'm familiar with the key. Sorry, the word's escaping me, but the gas and the electricity and stuff like that.
Oh, the okay.
And it's a great idea because I don't think we've ever actually given a talk on that. So I think that's something we can add to our list, Rhea. I think one thing that's interesting to me about that is that the internet also wasn't ever considered a key infrastructure. There we go. That's the word. Key infrastructure. And then they decided to hook up all this key infrastructure to computers and internet. And then we're suddenly surprised that when there's disturbances to the internet that they can't access their other key infrastructure.
Right. Well, and there's in my company, right? If you innovate, there's a reason why we're still around is because the operators, the business people at my company have looked at something and how can we change it? And so there is a reward in most companies for being innovative, for thinking the new thing, like, hey, I figured this out. So it's a balance of how do you, as a security person, track with them and be supportive of your company reinventing itself and moving forward and being in front of the next guy. So you're in uncharted territory, but not be that naysayer, negative security person saying, no, you can't go there. But realizing, that was definitely something I had to think of earlier. It's like, no, I'm a shareholder here. I want to make money too. And so enabling those things, I think you can have a different dialogue with people when you're saying, no, I'm here to make money with you, on those lines. And to your point, facilitating a critical infrastructure.
Thank you.
Oh, is that a book recommendation, Morgan?
Yes, it is. In fact, I recommend it highly. It will give you pause when you start thinking about critical infrastructure
Oh, okay.
and how that would be another very good read for the club next quarter, or when they decide they want to go into a little bit more in critical infrastructure. This is what keeps people awake at night in the government and in corporations.
It says the fall of General Electric. Is that the one?
No, this is when Ted Koppel back in
Attention
2015
Face coverings are required.
just how
Please maintain 6 feet from others when
just how
possible.
secure are our
Thanks
critical
for helping
infrastructure,
keep
all
everyone
16 of
safe.
them. And he does some very extensive interviewing, and it's quite an eye opener.
Got it.
For anyone who's
I was going to add the infrastructure area. If you guys, when you start looking at your careers and things like that, I like tangible things, and so that area tends to have a little more. Hey, I did this and this came out of it. There's some areas of IT and related security that there aren't tangibles, and it's not my favorite spot to be. So if you're looking for things, you're looking at long-term kind of thing, an oil, gas, petroleum place, you're looking at making gas come out and get places. So sometimes there's some fun, I think, in different areas like that.
in case anyone's driving or can't see in the chat, Morgan's book recommendation was Lights Out. And we'll put it in the notes so we can send it to you. Gabby also shared some CISA critical infrastructure information. So that might be good to look at. Gabby, what was that? I haven't clicked that link yet. Oh, sorry, Gabby is driving, so.
Okay. And InfoGuard, from my recollection, you can join that and not be in a company because that's on you. But double check that, and they might take students in. It actually has one of the best help desks out there that I've ever.
Yeah, just to add, you can join with InfoGuard as a volunteer or a student, and it's Jenifer, remind me, are they still doing security clearances?
They do a background check. I know
Background check. I don't mean clearances. Yeah, I mean a background check. So it's probably really good exposure for people who really want to work in a secure space.
Well, another thing to that point, that wherever your security careers, jaunt along, I'm in a situation right now that something might go faster just because I have done InfoGuard and some of this stuff. They've already vetted me. So once you start getting those things kind of under your belt, they could help some other things too. And thank you for the sandworm recommendation.
The other thing to add, a good reason, and I've thought about bringing InfoGuard up. It's just that people's time is very stretched right now. So I'm trying to figure out a good way for people to work that in, because the contacts that you make there, if this is something you're interested in, are gold.
Yeah, and I can connect you with a board member. He's a good friend of mine and the local chapter of InfoGuard.
Just checking. I have one more question, but I want to make sure everyone else's I've gotten through. It looks like it for now. There's more good recommendations in the chat for books, by the way. And oh yeah, so another question is, what kind of opportunities for learning did the FBI Citizen Academy give you?
Oh, that was so cool. It's been everything. Some highlights of things. And again, what you take from an experience, I think, implies, the lens you're looking through, what you're applying it to. So I've been involved in field training exercises, or they call them FTXs. where it was Levi Stadium. We're all moulaged up, and the FBI is doing their physical thing, and I'm laying there with shrapnel in my neck. And you look at it, oh, that works, that doesn't work. Or I've been at one where they had a blue on blue shooting, and you realize how important it is to communicate about what you're doing ahead of time. We've toured the USS Kentucky nuclear submarine in that group, Coast Guard, and you learn these other areas, these groups, these things that they have very important, in some cases, life or death things to do. And I've always been able to take something small from that. One of the things I use to this day and pretty regularly, we were in, and the honor of sitting in a room of probably 15 of us and Director Comey from the FBI. And this happened to be around the email stuff that was going around that time of the year. And somebody had asked him a question. We had the opportunity, we didn't have to script our questions. We could just ask Director Comey our questions. You're just left with two decisions and you have to choose the less bad. And it's like, man, yeah, why am I always trying to find the good in the bad? Sometimes I don't have a good one. I just have a less bad one. And I've used that, of just explaining something to my superiors, to my leaders or such of, I don't have something that's going to make it go away. I can make it just less. And I think those real conversations have helped. I've been in situations where I've had to uncomfortably present, people not following the rules, if you will, in interacting with my board and the FBI. And so those were times where I learned how to prepare a statement, to keep it short and sweet, be objective, take compassion and empathy into it because it was semi-personnel. I've organized huge events, and so just going through the logistics and things was a great experience. So it's just this myriad of stuff that you can take from it. But then ultimately you end up networking and you might find yourself in a new job. So it was the whole premise, and I don't know if you're familiar with the FBI Citizens Academy, but the FBI puts this on. And again, it was one of I was doing dealing with an incident that did involve the FBI. And after we were all done with it, they said, well, has anybody applied to this? And I was like, well, I don't know what that is, but sounds fun. And man, it was super cool. It's what they're doing is it's their community outreach. And so they bring in about 20, 30 people, and it's about 8 weeks, and you go in for 3 hours one night of the week. And they basically, all the squads come out and teach you about all those things the FBI does. And this special agent in charge comes and gives you a brief maybe about what's going on in the Seattle area. And you walk, the graduation's at their shooting range, so you get to shoot their guns, and that was kind of fun. But they ask you after the fact to be an ambassador for them in the community, and that really played out. We had a gentleman that was part of the Sikh community. There was a crime against a Sikh in the driveway in Bellevue. I don't know if you remember that. The FBI was able to work with that community through him. We've had youth group things, career-oriented community things, but what it led to, and this is where I say you can pull at a thread, but I've ended up taking Seattle, Kirkland, and Renton's police community academies and learned a lot about the community we work in, and again about tactics that they use, and some of it, you can twist it around and wash it, and oh yeah, I could use that too. I took one with Homeland Security as well, and then I'm actually proposed one, and hopefully it'll happen with the Secret Service because they don't have one. So, but we need those partnerships, and it helps me strengthen for my job when an incident has come up at my work, and somebody calls and says, "Hey, do you know anybody there? We need to talk to them now." Yeah, sure. I got them in my phone. So yeah, besides the just little morsels you pick up along the way, it helps your company. Where can we get a list of those? So if wherever you live, contact your police department, ask them if they put them on. And the FBI, it's on their website underneath community, I think it's under community outreach. And DHS, I don't know what their status is with it. This was like a one-time budgetary thing that they were like, we got to get this done this year. And again, networking wise, they had invited me to apply for it. But yeah, check with your local police departments or those neighboring cities, and just tell them, hey, I want to understand the relationship law enforcement has with the community. And it was different. Kirkland's was all out there. I even got tased and attacked by the dog. I volunteered. But then other ones were a little more conservative and more operational and more admin-like. But I learned a lot. It was really cool. For a little split second, I thought about changing careers too. And as far as students, it's more like a citizen. I don't think they would make a distinction between a student, non-student, more of a citizen of the community.
As far as I know, anyone can participate. And most cities do them almost annually. That's pre-COVID. I don't know about now, but I'm sure they're probably trying to get them back together.
Yeah, they're getting back together. And one of the chapters of the FBI one bragged about doing 3 online ones even during COVID. So I think they're working on getting it back up and running.
Well, that's super exciting. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us. Personally, I really appreciate it because it really helped me tie up some loose ends about thinking about my future career. It was really helpful. I really appreciate it. Though I should have kept a better track of time. I want to be respectful of your time, Jenifer. It's 6:45, so I'm totally happy to keep talking if people have questions, but I did want to let you know, and that we'll probably stop the recording. Just wanted to let you know the time in case you needed to know or get out of here.
I should definitely wrap up by 7, but I'm okay at the moment.
I see Morgan's hand up. If you had a question, Morgan, I wasn't sure.